What if I told you that one of World War II's most unlikely heroes stood 6 feet tall, weighed 510 pounds, and had an unusual fondness for cigarettes and beer? Meet Wojtek, a Syrian brown bear who officially enlisted in the Polish army, carried ammunition through the hell of Monte Cassino, and became a legend that sounds too incredible to be true. Our story begins on April 8, 1942, in the unforgiving mountains of Iran. The Polish soldiers trudging through this harsh landscape weren't tourists, they were survivors. Recently freed from Stalin's brutal Siberian gulags, these men had endured unimaginable hardships. They were making their way from Pahlavi to Tehran, hoping to join the fight against the Nazis who had torn their homeland apart. Inside that sack was a bear cub, barely a few months old, whose mother had been killed by hunters. The cub was scrawny, underfed, and utterly alone, much like the Polish soldiers themselves. Among the Polish refugees was 18-year-old Irina Bokiewicz, the great niece of General Bolesław Wieniawa-Długoszowski. When she saw the tiny cub, something stirred in her heart. Lieutenant Anatol Tarnowicki noticed her interest and made a decision that would echo through history. The trade was simple: a Swiss Army knife, some canned beef, and chocolate for one very small, very hungry bear cub. It might have been the best military procurement deal in history. Growing up in the army, Wojtek was assigned to the 22nd Artillery Supply Company of the Polish Second Corps. But this wasn't just adopting a pet. This was welcoming a new family member into a brotherhood forged by shared suffering and unwavering determination. The soldiers didn't just feed Wojtek, they bottle-fed him, taught him to walk upright, and watched him grow from a helpless cub into something remarkable. By the time he was fully grown, Wojtek stood 6 feet tall and weighed over 500 pounds of pure muscle and personality. But here's where Wojtek's story gets truly extraordinary. This wasn't just a bear living with soldiers. This was a bear becoming a soldier. He learned to salute by raising his right paw. He would wrestle with the men, always careful never to use his claws. He developed a taste for cigarettes, not smoking them, mind you, but eating them. He would drink beer, shower with the soldiers, and even learn to drive. Well, perhaps learn to drive is generous. He could work the steering wheel while sitting in the driver's seat, though the results were less than military precision. As the 22nd Company prepared to leave the Middle East for the European theater, they faced an impossible problem. Military transport ships didn't allow mascots or pets. Wojtek couldn't come with them. But the Polish soldiers had already lost too much. They weren't about to lose their beloved bear to bureaucracy. So they did something unprecedented. They officially enlisted Wojtek in the Polish army. Private Wojtek was given his own military serial number, his own pay book, and his own rank. The paperwork was official, the signatures were real, and suddenly the Polish army had its first, and likely only, Ursine enlisted man. In 1944, the Polish Second Corps found themselves facing one of the most daunting challenges of the entire war, the Battle of Monte Cassino. The ancient monastery, perched high on its mountain peak, had been turned into a nearly impregnable German fortress. 3 previous Allied assaults had failed with devastating casualties. The Polish soldiers knew they were walking into hell. What they didn't know was that their bear would walk into it with them. On May 12, 1944, as the Polish assault began, something extraordinary happened. Wojtek, now a seasoned soldier, began carrying ammunition. These weren't small bullets. These were 25-pound artillery shells, crates of them, each one crucial to the Polish advance. Picture this. In the middle of one of World War II's most brutal battles, with machine guns chattering, artillery shells exploding, and men dying around him, a 500-pound bear calmly walked back and forth, carrying box after box of ammunition to the front lines. He never flinched, never hesitated, never abandoned his post. His sight was so extraordinary that it became legend among the troops. Polish soldiers fighting for their lives would look up to see their bear, their Wojtek, fearlessly doing his duty. The psychological impact was immeasurable. If their bear could be brave, so could they. On May 18, 1944, Polish forces finally broke through. The Polish flag flew over Monte Cassino, and Wojtek had helped carry them to victory. For his service, he was promoted to corporal, the only bear in military history to achieve non-commissioned officer rank. When the war ended, Wojtek faced a problem that many soldiers shared. What do you do when the battle is over? The Polish Second Corps was stationed in Scotland, and Wojtek had become something of a celebrity. People would come from miles around just to see the famous soldier bear. But as the soldiers were demobilized and returned to civilian life, Wojtek's future became uncertain. Many of his closest companions were heading back to Poland, but Poland was now under Soviet control. For these men who had already suffered under Stalin, returning home wasn't an option. In 1947, the decision was made that broke many hearts. Wojtek was donated to the Edinburgh Zoo, where he would live out his remaining years. For the men who had raised him, fought alongside him, and loved him like a brother, this separation was devastating. But here's where Wojtek's story becomes truly heartbreaking and beautiful. His former comrades couldn't stay away. They would visit him regularly at Edinburgh Zoo, traveling from across Scotland and beyond. And Wojtek always remembered. When he heard Polish being spoken, he would lumber to the front of his enclosure, pressing his massive frame against the bars. He would reach out with those enormous paws, gently touching the faces of his old friends. Sometimes he would stand on his hind legs and salute, just like the old days. The veterans would bring him his favorite treats, cigarettes, which he would catch and eat with obvious pleasure. They would share a beer with him through the bars, just like old times. They would speak to him in Polish, and he would respond with soft grunts and gentle movements, as if he understood every word. For these aging soldiers, visiting Wojtek wasn't just nostalgia, it was a pilgrimage, a connection to the brotherhood they had shared, the family they had built in the crucible of war. In Wojtek's eyes, they could still see the young men they had once been, fighting for freedom in a world gone mad. As the years passed, the visits became less frequent. The soldiers grew older, some passed away, and gradually, Wojtek's world grew smaller. But he never forgot. Zookeepers would later say that, until his final days, Wojtek would still perk up at the sound of Polish voices, still look hopefully toward the entrance, still wait for his brothers to come home. Wojtek died peacefully on December 2nd, 1963, at the age of 21. His death made headlines around the world. Veterans from across Europe came to pay their respects to the bear who had been their brother in arms. The Edinburgh Zoo received hundreds of letters from people whose lives had been touched by his story. But death could not diminish Wojtek's legacy. In 2015, a magnificent bronze statue was unveiled in Edinburgh's Princes Street Gardens. Standing 7 feet tall, it depicts Wojtek in his prime, strong and proud, with a Polish soldier by his side. The statue bears a simple inscription, Wojtek the Soldier Bear, 1942 to 1963. But those who know his story see so much more. They see loyalty that transcends species, love that endures separation, and friendship that survives even death. At the statue's unveiling, elderly veterans, some of them Wojtek's last surviving companions, stood in the Scottish rain with tears streaming down their faces. They had waited decades to see their friend properly honored, and finally he was home. The statue has become a place of pilgrimage. Polish families bring their children to learn about Wojtek. Veterans from around the world leave flowers and small tributes. On quiet evenings, you might see an elderly man standing alone before the statue, speaking softly in Polish, as if sharing old memories with an old friend. There are other memorials too, in Krakow, in London, in Italy where he fought. But perhaps the most important monument to Wojtek isn't made of bronze or stone. It's the tears that still come to veterans' eyes when they tell his story. It's the wonder in children's faces when they hear about the bear who became a soldier. It's the reminder that love, once given, never truly dies. Today, Wojtek's legacy lives on in ways both grand and intimate. There are statues of him in Edinburgh, Krakow, and London. His story has been told in books, documentaries, and films. The 22nd Artillery Supply Company still bears his image on their emblem, but perhaps the most important legacy isn't carved in stone or cast in bronze. It's the reminder that in our darkest hours, love and loyalty can bloom in the most unexpected places, that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, that sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we're born into. More than a symbol, he was a soldier, a friend, a brother. He was proof that even in the midst of humanity's greatest conflict, our capacity for love, loyalty, and hope could not be extinguished. In a war that claimed millions of lives and shattered countless dreams, one small bear cub grew up to remind us all what it truly means to serve with honor, fight with courage, and love without condition. This is the story of Wojtek, the joyous soldier who proved that sometimes the most extraordinary heroes are the ones we least expect.